Thanks for joining us online. Our church exists to help people find God, experience freedom, discover their purpose, and make a difference. If you have any questions about Journey Church, please visit us online at ourjourney.tv. Welcome home. Welcome to Journey Church.
This morning, I get to introduce to you our very own Dale Yerton, who holds the role of what we call an apostle. Now, before you think, now wait a minute, apostle were just those 12 guys in the New Testament. Apostle means spiritual father. And Paul himself said, you have a lot of teachers, but you don't have a lot of spiritual dads. And I wish you would. And so a spiritual father helps keep this pastor and this church out of hot water, amen? And so there is a beautiful harmony that happens here at Journey Church because we believe in unity and we believe in accountability. And so would you please give a wonderful welcome to our very own Dr. Dale Yerton.
Most of you will never know what it's like to be a pastor, let alone what I serve. I just pastor pastors is what I do. Being in that role it's too big for any man or woman because you're trying to represent God. And I've never met anybody that was big enough to do it. Only God can do it through us. And it's one of the reasons you need to pray for your pastors. Because when you got a man and woman that love you, that's a gift from God. Not everybody loves you. Why did they love you? Why would they leave the place they lived and come hundreds of miles to a group of people they never met before? God has to put that in their heart. Now, this is what we find with Elijah. And so we've already talked about, Pastor Vince has done the first two lessons on Elijah. Now, let me talk about the third thing that's got to develop within us. If we're going to live a life of significance, if we're going to make a difference in our world, we must have courage. That's where so many good ideas die. We don't have the courage to do it. We don't have the courage to take the step of faith. Now, Elijah excels in this area. This is one of the areas he's very strong in courage. In the book of 1 Kings, the 18th chapter, verses 1 and 2, and I would encourage you to read that or write it down where you can read it later. And it came to pass after many days that the word of the Lord came to Elijah in the third year, saying, "Go, present yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain on the earth." So Elijah went to present himself to Ahab, and there was a severe famine in Samaria. It's a terrible famine that's been going on for 3 years. 3 years, no rain whatsoever. And everybody is suffering from it, even the king and the queen. The queen, she's so angry, she's killing the prophets of the Lord. See, she was an idolatrous woman. She worshiped Baal, which is not Jehovah. Big difference there. She was an idolater. And so her reaction is, kill the prophets of Jehovah. Get rid of them. King Ahab, he's a little more practical than that. He's trying to find grass to be able to feed all the animals, to keep the animals from dying. Get this off here so I can take a sip of water. Excuse me. He is blaming Elijah for the famine. It's always somebody's fault. And so Elijah hears what God says and responds immediately. He goes to meet King Ahab. Courage comes out of our convictions. If you don't have the conviction, you will never have the courage to act upon it. Now, this is the thing that amazes me, that we have so many people that say they believe in Jesus, but they don't act like Jesus. What's the problem? Many of them are good, weak people. Their weakness overcomes their courage. See, because if we don't have something that we believe enough that we're willing to die for it, we really are just giving a mental assent to it. And that's where so many people are. And so let me give you 4 points I want to leave with you. Number 1, challenging Obadiah. Obadiah, who are we talking? Where does he come in? Well, he's in the story. The next verse, it says, and God had said to Elijah, go present yourself to King Ahab. And he said, he went and he spoke to Obadiah. Obadiah was the king's servant. He also was a believer in Jehovah. In fact, that's what his name literally means. It means a servant of Jehovah. But he's living this dichotomy. He not only says, I am a servant of Jehovah, he's serving King Ahab. And that's what gets him into trouble. He's what we would call a closet believer. Or it's becoming a new term that's thrown around, a cultural Christian. What do you mean a cultural Christian? It means you're a closet believer. You're a believer in Jesus, but you don't let anybody know it. He lives his life in fear. Now, I don't want to demean this, because put yourself in his shoes. It's a tough spot. Queen Jezebel's been killing servants of Jehovah. This is a real threat. So he is afraid to let anybody know. Am I talking to anyone? There are some of you on your job. Oh, no. They say whatever they want around you because they don't even know that you are a Christian. You've kept it to yourself. This is Obadiah. He's living this life that's controlled by fears. So much that when Elijah shows up, I was reading it again this morning, and it just makes me laugh because the contrast between Elijah and Obadiah is just so dramatic. Obadiah it's like he's talking so fast and he's stammering over his words. Is that you, Elijah? We've heard everywhere. With the king. And he goes on. I read those words just to see how long in the Bible said. Over a minute. He's just rambling, why? Because he's scared. He doesn't know. He knows Elijah showed up. Something's going to happen. Go tell Ahab, he says, that Elijah is here. Wow. Now, listen to me carefully, because I know there are many of you are a sincere believer. I want to give you an assignment this week. Go find Obadiah. This town is full of Obadiahs. They're all around us. Secret believers. Oh, they love Jesus. They love to come to the worship service, particularly when they turn the lights down, because nobody can see the tear that trickles down the cheek or the hand that's raised. Are you listening to me? That's Obadiah. He's scared. He's afraid of what Jezebel will do if she finds out he's a true believer. What's Elijah doing? He's forcing Obadiah to take a step of faith. Go tell King Ahab, Elijah is here. I challenge you, find an Obadiah this week. Challenge them. Just speak up for what you believe. You don't have to yell and scream and get red in your ears. No. Just say, I believe in Jesus. Now, the second thing I want to talk about is about confronting Ahab. Why does Elijah need to confront Ahab? Because he is the political power. He is the leader of the nation. And Elijah wants to bring the whole nation together for this spiritual showdown. Now, What does Ahab do? He blames Elijah. When he comes, the first thing he starts doing is saying, "Is that you, O troubler of Israel?" Boy, Elijah, he don't take that sitting down. There's no lack of courage here. He said, "I'm not the one that is troubling Israel. It's you and your idolatrous ways. That's what's causing this problem." Just last night, I am sure most of you probably heard, on I-75, just north of London, Kentucky, there was an active shooting last night. People that were shot, and I can't get the details yet on it, but I call my dear friend Don Sims. Many of you know. I get a hold of Don, and Don says, "Man," he said, "we were on I-75. We were headed right. We were 5 minutes from where the shooting took place on I-75. If we'd have been 5 minutes earlier, we'd have been caught right in the middle of it." Thank God he is safe. He is well. But I just went on Facebook and posted, "Pray for our friends in London, Kentucky. There's an active shooter." Boy, immediately I get this response. This whoever he is, he says, responds is that, "Praying doesn't seem to be working, doesn't it? Why don't you vote for a ban to do away with AR-15s?" And I posted back and said, "You don't know God, do you?" I'm not going to rant and rave with him. I'm not going to fuss and argue with him because I know what he is saying. But you ban AR-15s, so what? The next time they use a machine gun or a hand grenade, then where are you going to? The truth is, there are some things only God can do. And only God can turn the heart of this nation. God help us. But I'm not going to take it lying down either. Go tell Ahab. And he says, "I'm not the one that's troubling Israel. It's you." And so he tells him the truth. But he needs Ahab's help to get everybody together. He wants the whole nation to be there. And so this is the reason he brings him into the equation. Now here's the third thing I wanted to talk about. Conquering Baal. Conquering Baal. Elijah understands the real issue is not the lack of rain, the famine. No, that just illustrates the problem. That's not the real issue. The real issue that they're facing is, which God are you going to serve? Who is going to be Lord of your life? And just like the man that challenged me, praying doesn't seem to be working, does it? I don't want to get into that, but the truth of it is, prayer does work, and that's why I pray. It's because the more I pray, the luckier I get. Yeah, I see some of you have had that experience. The real issue is, what God are you going to serve? Do you see what the man was doing? He was blaming me for the problem. And I had nothing to do with the problem. The problem is, we have forgotten God. There is no fear of God. There is no respect. And because we've sown to the wind, we're reaping the whirlwind. Elijah challenges them to what we would call a firefight. We're going to build 2 altars, one to Jehovah, one to Baal. Put a bullock upon the altar, but no fire. The God that answers by fire will be the God. I think we preachers, we are more impressed with ourselves than anybody else at times. And I think this was Elijah, because everybody, yes, that's a great idea. And they're not interested in the idea. They just like fireworks. Anybody like fireworks? Oh, we're going to see the fire fall here. This is going to be, and that's what they were excited about. And so Elijah said, we'll give the prophets of Baal the first opportunity. It's really a sad story to read, because they really get into this thing big time. They're leaping around their altar. They're crying louder and louder. They even start cutting themselves with their sacrificial knives. And it said they were bleeding profusely. They start prophesying. Almost sounds like some meetings I've been in a few times. I mean, they're really into this thing. But then it says there was no voice. In other words, heaven did not respond. And then it says no one paid attention. Now, I really think this is where so many people are, that nobody is answering. Nobody's there. Now, Elijah, because he knows, Elijah is filled with faith, confidence, the courage to act upon it. Excuse him, but he's having fun. He's enjoying this whole scene. He can't resist the irony that this Baal, this Lord of the wind, the fire, the rain, he can't send any fire, so he begins taunting them. He's just teasing, saying, cry louder. Maybe he's hard of hearing. Maybe he went on a journey. Maybe he's talking to his friend. He's on the phone. And then literally there are some translations that say what he says literally is, maybe he went to the bathroom. That possibly, because Elijah's a real man. And so he confronts them and says, you've got to make a decision. Now, here's the fourth thing I want to talk about. I'm going to call this calling Israel. And here you hear the heart of this man of God that's become compassionate. He feels for these people. It says in 1 Kings 18 and 30, then Elijah said to all the people, come near to me. And so all the people came near to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord that was broken down. I really believe that is what God is saying to every one of us as believers. Come near to me. I think there is too much distance between the pew and the altar. I think there are too many people that think of prayer like talking to a stranger or somebody that is far, far away. Elijah doesn't do that at all. As I said, I went back and reread this morning, and it just amazes me. In 20 seconds, you can read this man's prayer. What he says to God. It's so simple, so calm, collected. He's praying. Everything that he does in this setting is to remind them of their covenant that they had with God that they had broken. For instance, the altar is broken down. What's he do? He chooses 12 big rocks to build. Why did he choose 12? Because there had been 12 tribes of Israel. Now there's only 10. 2 of them are to the south in the kingdom of Judah. The covenant has been broken. 12 stones. He repairs the broken altar with those 12 stones. Then he takes and calls for some barrels of water, we would call it. And where this took place is by the seashore, so it's quite obvious where they got the water, because it's a time of drought. And he says, bring 4 barrels. Do it again. Do it a third time. So there's 12 barrels of water that he has them dump on his altar to just let them know nothing's going on here. This is the real deal. He's reminding them of their covenant with God. He begins praying this simple prayer, but never one time mentions fire. Not once. And yet, though he never said one word about fire, bam! The fire falls. It's like a nuclear explosion. It's like lightning that struck the place. And the whole thing goes up in smoke. Not just the sacrifice, but the stones, the wood, the water, everything. Even the dust of the ground is licked up, and there's nothing but a hole left where the sacrifice had been. Now listen to me carefully. This is why you need to pray for your pastors. It was last year, Pastor Vince and I was talking. He was mostly talking at that time, and I was just listening. He was talking about this year, last year, and he's looking ahead, and he's saying, I'm dreading next year. Next year is going to be a difficult time for our people because it's election time again. There's going to be so much political fighting, and that we've got to try to help our. And I'm thinking to myself, he's praying for you 1 year ahead. Thank God for pastors that are genuine men of God. Most of you were not praying for 12 years in advance. You weren't even thinking about it. But that is exactly why we're doing this series right now, living a life of significance. If Elijah can do it with Ahab and Jezebel, we can do it with Democrats and Republicans. That's a puny amen. Let's give God praise. Amen. Christians are unusual people. They love Jesus, but they don't want to see him. I was never so shocked as when COVID hit, how many Christians were afraid they were going to die. And I'm shocked because I don't feel that way. I mean, I'm not, this is no death wish. I'm not wanting to leave today. I'm not looking for a fiery chariot, but I'm just simply saying, I'm not scared. What is there to be scared of? Heaven? You can't threaten me with heaven. Oh, yeah, this is Kentucky, but it ain't heaven. Oh, I mean, what are you scared of? Elijah was not afraid. He had the courage to just stand alone if necessary. And so I'm challenging you. Do what the prophet did when his back was to the wall. There's 850 prophets of Baal and Asherah. There's only he with an altar. What's he do? He prays. That's what I'm challenging you to do. Pray. Pray. I'm convinced the number one reason people do not pray is because they don't believe anybody's listening. If you believed that God was listening to you, I don't know what that does to you, but it's one of the most humbling experiences I experience every day in my life. I try to start my day with a time just meditating and praying, seeking God, praying. That's what we can do to make a difference. That's what, if we will do. I was telling Evelyn this morning, I remember back when I first met her almost 57 years this November. And I mean, it was a life-changing experience for me. I was praying and seeking God sincerely because I was a young evangelist. I knew I needed a wife, but I could not find a girl anywhere that loved Jesus like I did. Every time I'd start dating a girl, she would start pulling me away from God. And I finally became so frustrated. I made a vow. I will never date again until I can find a girl that loves you as much as I do. Now, we make those vows. I don't know how long I could have kept it, but I was about 6 months into my vow, and boy, one day I met Evelyn. I can remember I preaching in a little dead Pentecostal church. Oh my, I've done that thousands of times, and trying to get people, I couldn't even get them to pray. I'd preach my heart out, and the altar is still, not filled with people. They'd just sit and talk to their friends and go home and come back and do it again. And so finally one day, because I couldn't get them to invite anybody to come to service. How long has it been since you invited someone to come? Just invite someone, somebody that would profit from this series on living a life of significance. Someone that is struggling. Tip them off on the book of Job. It's too good to share it with somebody. And I thought, if I can't get them to do it, I will do it myself. And I started going around knocking on all the doors, that little community, inviting everybody to come. And there was a road that went up and dead-ended at a house. And I thought, well, let's see who lives up there. And I go up there, and it was her mother that came to the door because everybody else was at work. And I told them I'm the young evangelist preaching in the church here, and we'd like to invite you to come. I didn't know they never went to that church. But when they came home from work that evening, her mother, who was a very reserved lady, very much reminds me a lot of Evelyn, just always a lady, and she brings it up at the table, said, the young evangelist that's preaching at the church came and invited us to come to the meeting. And they started, really? Why don't we go? By the time dinner was over, they had decided they were coming to service that night. And that's how I met her. Lucky? Don't know about that. I know there's time and chance involved in everything, but the more I pray, the luckier I get. And we've now been married for over 56 years. That's a pretty good prayer answer. I challenge you, build an altar, pray. Hey, this is too good to keep alone. Find an Obadiah, somebody he's a secret believer, and challenge him. Hey, I tell you, we've got a series going on in church. You need to come hear this on a life of significance. It's too good to keep. Give it away. Elijah does this because he knows God, and he knows he's doing God's will, and it gives him the courage to act upon it. The good news is, as soon as he prayed, the fire fell, Israel repented, and the rain returned. That's how we get the United States of America back on track again. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray, then I will hear from heaven and heal their land. Amen.
Thanks for listening online. Our desire is to journey with you however you want to connect with us. We look forward in doing life with you. Now, let's go this week and be the church in our community as we focus on loving God and loving others. We'll see you here next week at 425 Millbrook Drive, Hopkinsville, Kentucky.